Okay. I'm remembering them, so I'm writing them here before, because if I start talking, I will forget. And then service accounts. All right.
It has to do with a.
All right. So I already have like 7 written down.
Is that
So that I don't forget. So let me start. Thank you. You all tried. So number 1, AlwaysOn is heavily dependent on network, internet, because that's how the servers communicate, right? So the only way for the primary to communicate with secondary is through the internet, and that's through the TCP endpoints. So if your internet is not strong enough, if the network is not strong enough, then that's a challenge. So what challenge do you face if you have, all those network glitches? You have what we call false failover due to transient network glitch. This is a common challenge. Okay, so if they ever ask you in an interview, this is a common challenge with AlwaysOn, especially if you are using synchronous commit mode and you set it to automatic failover. So as soon as your primary server, as soon as the listener is not able to reach the primary server, it assumes the primary server is offline, maybe due to just a network glitch within a few seconds. Then it fails over PRAM to the secondary. So you would experience false failover due to a short network problem, because it's heavily dependent on network glitch. So how do you solve this? Solution. There are a couple solutions. Number 1 is to use manual failover. So manual failover means it will not fail over by itself, even if the servers are not reachable. You have to go and manually fail it over. So it will not be giving you false failover if you use manual failover. That's one way to fix that. Another way is to adjust the sensitivity of the AlwaysOn. Adjust AOG, that's AlwaysOn availability group sensitivity. How sensitive it is to network, you have to adjust it. So there are some parameters you can change, some subnet delay, same subnet delay, cross subnet delay, and some other stuff like that. You can change them using PowerShell to reduce how sensitive it is to network glitches. So that's that. Number 2, another common challenge is the listener DNS. Remember, the listener is not a server. It's a virtual IP, right? The listener is a virtual IP. And another this thing they call the listener, I don't remember, is I think it's network something. But listener is also heavily dependent on network. So if your DNS is messed up, your listener could be pointing to the wrong server instead of pointing to the primary. Okay. If your listener DNS is messed up, DNS is a record of the name and the corresponding IP. So you could be pointing to the wrong server. Instead of pointing to the primary, you may be pointing to the current primary, you may be pointing to the previous primary. So how do you fix that? You flush the DNS. This is usually done by the network team. The network team, they know better when it comes to network stuff than a regular DBA. So that's why I always say that a DBA cannot work alone. You work with different people. So you just work with the network guys to flush the DNS of your listener, and then it will start pointing to the right primary node. So this is another common challenge with AlwaysOn. Another one is the one you mentioned, orphan user. So as you create the login on the primary, make sure you create the login on the secondary. If not, you will create orphan user on the secondary. And when the failover happens, and your secondary now becomes the primary, all the people or users that are already connecting to the previous primary will no longer be able to connect to the current or the new primary because they are already orphaned. So solution creates logins on primary and sec nodes. Okay. Number 4. So
Excuse me, Ade. I have a question with that.
okay.
Instead of creating the login on the primary and secondary, can you just script out the login and permission and run it on the secondary?
Yeah, it's the
Okay.
same thing.
Okay.
Whether you create manually or you script it out, but just create it. Okay, whenever you create a login on the primary, make sure you do the same on the secondary. You can create it again manually, you can script it out and then run it. So another common challenge is database being in what? Resolving state is another common challenge. So this is not a requirement, this is not a limitation, it's a challenge with AlwaysOn. So I'm going to throw this back to you guys. What does it mean when a database is in resolving state? What does it mean for a database to be in resolving state? Nobody knows it. And I wanted to do giveaway. But nobody wants.
Does it
To
mean
know.
the database is not in either the primary or secondary node?
Yes, share quickly answer when he had giveaway. Yes.
Give my body a gas.
So a database in resolving states when it's neither primary nor secondary. So there are 3 states in AlwaysOn AG. Is either for a database that a database can be in. Is that database is in primary state, or is in secondary state, or is in resolving state? For the most part, I think there are other states, but for the most part, those 3 states. So a primary state means that the database is on the primary node and is on the current primary node. You know, primary node can change depending on when failover happens. So if the database is on the current primary node, then that database is in the primary state. If the database is on the current secondary node, then that database is in a secondary state. But when a database is neither primary nor secondary, then it is resolving state. And that one is not good. It's like the database is in coma. You cannot connect to it because it is neither on the primary nor on the secondary. So we don't want that. And this usually happens when there's a problem with the database or with network or hardware. For example, if you are experiencing CPU or memory pressure on your primary, and then you set your failover to automatic, and it tried to failover, it could not failover, and it just hang in the middle. So it's like your database is in coma. It's not on the primary, nor on the secondary. It wants to failover, but it could not failover, it's just in between. So how do you fix this? So when you have a database in resolving state, what we usually do is either you do what we call a force. You're going to force it to failover. To either go to primary or secondary. So we usually do force failover. And with force failover, there's a risk of data loss. So this force failover is different from false failover. This one means fake. It's like fake failover. It's not real. This one means you are forcing it to fail, to take it out of resolving, to be in primary or secondary.